Helena Cronin is the co-director of the London School of Economics Centre for Philosophy and Natural and Social Science, and author of The Ant and the Peacock: Altruism and Sexual Selection from Darwin to Today. She recently penned an article in response to Edge's annual question for 2017. What scientific term or concept ought to be more widely known? So what did she choose? Well, Helena chose sex, or more specifically, the biological basis for sex differences. Quote, "The poet Philip Larkin famously proclaimed that sex began in 1963. He was inaccurate by 800 million years. Moreover, what began in the 1960s was instead a campaign to oust sex, in particular sex differences, in favour of gender. Why? Because biological differences were thought to spell genetic determinism, immutability, anti-feminism, and most egregiously, women's oppression. Gender, however, was the realm of societal forces. Male and female were social constructs, the stuff of political struggle, so gender was safe sex. The campaign triumphed. Sex now struggles to be heard over a clamour of misconceptions, fabrications, and denunciations. And gender is ubiquitous, dominating thinking far beyond popular culture and spreading even to science. And most profoundly, gender has distorted social policy. This is because the campaign has undergone baleful mission creep. Its aim has morphed from ending discrimination against women into a deeply misguided quest for sameness of outcome for males and females in all fields. Above all, 50-50 across the entire workplace. This stems from a fundamental error, the conflation of equality and sameness. It's an error all too easily made if your starting point is that the sexes are really the same and that apparent differences are mere artifacts of sexist socialization. Consider that 50-50 gender equal workplace. A stirring call, but what will it look like? So at this point she goes into an examination of what it would mean if the UK suddenly adopted a 50-50 gender split across occupations. So for example, because nursing is 90% female, 256,000 female nurses would have to find another job to make way for the men. But that's okay because 570,000 men would have to move out of the construction and building trade sector to make way for an equal number of women. The UK would also need 15,000 more women window cleaners, 127,000 women electricians, 143,000 women vehicle mechanics, and 130,000 women metal machinists, just to name a few. And she notes further, the most dangerous and dirty occupations are currently almost entirely 100% male, at least 500,000 jobs in the UK. And she muses, perhaps women teachers could become tomorrow's gender equal refuse collectors, quarry workers, roofers, water and sewage plant operators, scaffolders, stagers and riggers. But of course we all know by now that feminists don't want 50-50 representation in those jobs. It's only the high prestige, high paying jobs like CEOs, STEM fields and politicians. As she notes, and perhaps gender balanced pigs could fly. At this point the question becomes, if that's the solution, what on earth was the problem? Gender proponents seem to be blithely unaware that thanks to their conflation of equality and sameness, they are now answering an entirely different set of concerns, such as diversity, underrepresentation, imbalance, without asking what on earth they have to do with the original problem, discrimination. Bear in mind that equality is not sameness. Equality is about fair treatment, not about people or outcomes being identical. So fairness does not and should not require sameness. However, when sameness gets confused with equality, and equality is of course to do with fairness, then sameness ends up undeservedly sharing the moral high ground. And male-female discrepancies become a moral crusade. Why so few women CEOs or engineers? It becomes socially suspect to explain this as the result not of discrimination, but of differential choice. Well, it shouldn't be suspect because the sexes do differ, and in ways that, on average, make a notable difference to their distribution in today's workplace. Here's why the sexes differ. A sexual organism must divide its total reproductive investment into two, competing for mates and caring for offspring. Almost from the dawn of sexual reproduction, one sex specialised slightly more in competing for mates and the other slightly more in caring for offspring. This was because only one sex was able to inherit the mitochondria, the powerhouse of cells, so that sex started out with sex cells larger and more resource-rich than the other sex, and thus began the great divide into fat, resource-laden eggs, already investing in caring, providing for offspring, and slim, streamlined sperm, already competing for that vital investment. Over evolutionary time, this divergence widened, proliferating and amplifying in every sexually reproducing species that has ever existed. So the differences go far beyond reproductive plumbing. They are distinctive adaptations for the different life strategies of competitors and carers. Whenever ancestral males and females face different adaptive problems, we should expect sex differences encompassing bodies, brains, and behaviour. And we should expect that, reflecting those differences, competitors and carers will have correspondingly different life priorities. And that's why, from that initial asymmetry, the same characteristic differences between males and females have evolved across all sexually reproducing animals. Differences that pervade what constitutes being male or female. As for different outcomes in the workplace, the causes are above all different interests and temperaments. Women on average have a strong preference for working with people, hence the nurses and teachers, and compared to men, they care more about family and relationships and have broader interests and priorities, hence little appeal in becoming CEOs. Men have far more interest in things, hence the engineers, and they are vastly more competitive, more risk-taking, ambitious, status-seeking, single-minded, opportunistic, hence the CEOs. So men and women have, on average, different conceptions of what constitutes success, despite the gender quest to impose the same male conception on all. And here's some intriguing evidence. Gender predicts that, as discrimination diminishes, males and females will increasingly converge. But a study of 55 nations found that it was in the most liberal, democratic, equality-driven countries that divergence was greatest. The less the sexism, the greater the sex differences. Difference, this suggests, is evidence not of oppression, but of choice, not socialization, not patriarchy, not false consciousness, not even pink t-shirts or personal pronouns, but female choice. And that study she refers to is the one that I've brought up many times before, and it's this one that appeared in the Journal of Psychology in 2008 titled, "Why Can't a Man Be More Like a Woman? Sex Differences in Big 5 Personality Traits Across 55 Cultures." And here's the key paragraph in that study. Sex differences in most personality traits, however, are not uniform in magnitude across all samples. At times, sex differences can be much larger in some cultures than in others. One unexpected finding has been that sex differences in personality traits are often larger in prosperous, healthy, and egalitarian cultures in which women have more opportunities equal with men. Both in self-report and in other report data, Asian and African cultures generally show the smallest sex differences, whereas European and American cultures, in which living standard and gender equality indexes are generally higher, show the largest differences. With improved national wealth and equality of the sexes, it seems differences between men and women in personality traits do not diminish. On the contrary, the differences become conspicuously larger. And I've linked that article below if you'd like to take a closer look at it. So as Helena Cronin concludes, an evolutionary understanding shows that you can't have sex without sex differences. It's only within that powerful scientific framework in which ideological questions become empirical answers that gender can be properly understood. And as the fluidity of sexualities enters public awareness, sex is again crucial for informed, enlightened discussion. So for the sake of science, society, and sense, bring back sex.